First of all, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day. I know everyone's busy, especially here in the IT space. We've got a real nice, diverse audience ranging from owners and operators of small businesses and some small IT providers, all the way through mid-market and enterprise IT directors and CIOs joining us today. I think we have two countries that I know of represented, possibly more. And we've got an audience that's across several verticals, legal, manufacturing, healthcare, finance, and many more. So really appreciate everybody taking the time. The goal for today is going to be just to provide some educational content. We solicited some questions and we're going to, ask those to the panelists that we have here. As most of you already know, TruPoint works alongside IT departments and IT organizations as a trusted resource to help you identify and source solutions to solve your IT challenges. Today's focus is obviously security, and we've kind of custom curated some esteemed panelists to represent some organizations that are within our portfolio. The folks were individually selected because they bring a sort of unique, or they represent different areas of the security landscape. So we think it's going to be an interesting conversation around some questions that you guys submitted to us. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn us over and do some introductions of the panelists who have joined us today. And let's start, Bill, if you would start, just if you would take 2 or 3 minutes, give us a little bit of your background, what your role is today. Obviously, you're with TruPoint, so not too much on your organization, but please include one interesting fact, if you would.
Sounds good. You guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, so I've been at TruPoint for about 2.5 years. I'm the director of operations here. I also serve as one of the sales engineers for our advanced services, so cybersecurity, infrastructure, IaaS, that kind of stuff. Much of my employment prior to TruPoint, especially over the last 10 years, was centered around IT and regulatory compliance. In fact, I spent about 4 years building a FedRAMP cloud service offering for the Department of Defense. So that was a fortified IT infrastructure system from the ground up. It was basically a cybersecurity first model. I dabbled in a lot of the NIST and CIS frameworks, which that was kind of an interesting 4 years. But prior to that, I was doing my own IT consulting for many years for mid-sized businesses, ran my own MSP for a bit, VCIO for 2 different 50+ unit retail chains where we had PCI compliance because we did ACH, EFT, credit card processing, that kind of thing. Worked for accounting firms. And prior to that, I've been an IT director. I've sat in your guys' seats. And I spent some time as an engineer in MSPs as well. Did a little bit of traveling throughout the country talking about Citrix when Citrix was a brand new thing. And worked as an IT director in a couple of different accounting firms, even before I did consulting for them. And even through that, I got some opportunities to do some white hat work, which was kind of cool. I got to break into some computers for some forensic and legal subpoena purposes. So that was kind of fun too. So yeah, like I said, I sat in the same seat as many of you guys. IT director with limited resources, trying to keep the wheels on while also trying to innovate, keeping my eye on the front door to make sure that we had secure computing practices, and all the while trying to balance efficiency for those who are serving the business's customers. So interesting fact, I've never once ordered from Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, or any other food delivery service. But my wife and I do have young adult children who are willing to go to the grocery store for us. So I guess that's something.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Bill. Again, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Rosana, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, happy to. Hi, guys. I'm Rosana. I am Cybersafe's Vice President of Sales. Cybersafe, if we haven't met one another yet, we are a full service managed security service provider. Something that I would say, for all folks that are meeting us for the first time, that I'd want them to know is Cybersafe has a security offering that can really be aligned to add value no matter where an organization is in their security journey. So those companies that have, really not done much, but they understand that now is the time to begin to think about their strategy and make investments. To those folks that are somewhere in the middle, right? Maybe a new IT director or CISO or whatever it may be, joined a new team, right? They might have inherited a set of infrastructure and organizational practices that they want to understand, right? All the way though to those that are, light years into their security program, right? That are well invested, well funded, and everything kind of in between. So typically, where that would be materialized is through our service offerings. So we really have three buckets as to how we support our client base. We are very much international. Our clients stretch across 70 plus countries, as much as we are national. So we are industry agnostic with what we work with, except for the federal government. Fun fact for you. But we do tons of work in state and local municipalities and education and things of that nature. That's actually a good lead in to the way that we support them. So three divisions for our business. Incident response is our first. So we deal with lots of hacked companies. These are companies that were not a client of ours. This can be everywhere from ransomware to business email compromise to your wire fraud situation, all the way down to a user saying, I think my mouse moved and I swear I didn't do it, right? So our team has the capability to do that incident response and digital forensics. We do have support from how do I assess my risk if I don't even know what it is, right? So we can align things of that nature like assessments, pen testing, risk assessments. And then most importantly, our bread and butter, our core offering is continuous security monitoring, SOC as a service, extended detection and response, your EDR, your MDR. If we want to be an alphabet soup, we can spend some time there, but essentially bringing visibility to all of the places that an organization might inherit business risk. So it's really enjoyable for us to be able to do that. We know that it's a lot more cost effective for companies to be proactive than it is to be reactive. So we wrap that up in a nice bow and deliver it from our containment SOC. So real-time response is our priority. It is imperative for us. The quicker we can see something, the quicker we can eradicate it. Obviously, that is the best business outcome for all parties. So we do incident response as part of our service. We do, like I mentioned, all of that alert clearing. So we're making sure that we can be a true extension of our client's team. And we facilitate that through a custom built and proprietary SOAR, another acronym for you, but basically our way of integrating with AI and other automation elements as part of our service, which is very timely for our conversation today. So I'll give you plenty of opinions on that and gotchas, pitfalls, and things to watch out for. So great to meet you all. Thanks for having me, guys.
One interesting fact that we may not know about you, Rosana.
Oh gosh. So me personally, I'm a triplet. That gets people. So we're not three lookalikes though. If they were on this call and you saw them, you guys wouldn't even know.
That's interesting. So we actually have two different sets of twins on our team. So no triplets, but twins. So it's interesting. And obviously, right now it's tough for IT directors to keep staff, keep their staffing levels high. So outsourcing to MSSPs like yours is something we're seeing a lot of with our customers. So thank you for joining. Ryan, tell us a couple of minutes about you and Simpli Meta, and then again, one thing that's an interesting fact about Mr. Harrelson.
Yeah, so my name's Ryan Harrelson. I've been in IT my entire career. My first job in IT was actually for my high school. They hired me to build out the first computer lab that they ever put together. Probably could be my interesting fact right there. And I kind of followed that through the rest of my career. So before I moved over into the consulting side, I was the global VP of infrastructure for a large international organization, had offices scattered around the world. I started working with a company very similar to TruPoint at the time, really loved what they were doing, and took that opportunity to move over into the consulting side. So kind of like Bill, I've sat on your side of the table. I've ran large infrastructures and IT departments across the globe, understand the complexity of the Great Wall of China and all sorts of those fun things that you have to get used to as you start to work into that enterprise space. I started my company 5 years ago. Some of these people on the call have already worked with us. Originally, the company name was Metadata Engineering. We are in the process of doing a rebranding. So this is kind of my rebranding launch. I kind of was hoping to have the new website out before we got to this, but I didn't quite meet it. So launching out the new Simpli Meta brand, breaking it up with just a little bit better focus to what it is that we're doing for those that are on this call that have worked with us, a little bit more focus on how we're doing. So it's really more of a marketing change. But what we do at Simpli Medic can be broken into 3 core categories. We have a field services team that is boots on ground anywhere in the country, Mexico, Canada, and we've even started sneaking into Western Europe a little bit. That team can do anything from smart hands to running cables to placing phones, rack and stack, pre-purchase assessments. We do a lot of like physical site assessments and looking at what's out there, decommissioning of equipment. You pretty much name it, that team can work on that. The second pillar is going to be our senior engineering. So we work a lot with the Cybersafes, with TruPoint, with CBTS, those types of organizations to help with any sort of implementation, larger projects they may have going on. All of our engineers are senior level. They're tier 4s, architect level guys. And we have over 70 of them across the globe, across a varied level of skill sets. And our third pillar is we do have a dedicated cybersecurity and compliance team. So we help a lot with readiness assessments, whether that be a NIST or an ISO 2700 or SOC 2s, FedRAMP, CMMC, high trust, you name it. We'll work with you to do those assessments, make sure you're prepared, work with the auditors. And we can even do that ongoing. So we support a handful of organizations on an ongoing basis where we might run their third-party risk management program. We might handle all the incoming audits. So working with us, bringing us into any sort of a project is a great way to have in some holistic engineering that allows us to work very closely with the TruPoint team to find the right ongoing vendors to manage that in the grand scheme of things. So we're here to support you guys in any sort of engineering endeavors that you might have across any of the technology stacks. And as I like to tell everyone, I am always available for any sort of business strategic conversations you want to have or planning components that you might have. Interesting fact, I never once through high school told anyone I wanted to do IT for a living. I was convinced I was going to conform on Broadway and I was going to go to Juilliard when I graduated high school.
That's great.
So this is the closest I've gotten to the big stage is doing doing talks like this. But that was always my dream. I thought I was going to perform on Broadway.
I don't know, Ryan. I think I've seen you act out once or twice at different times. So
I have no problem acting. I'm just not supposed to be doing it when I do that.
Well, thank you again for joining, and really appreciate you bringing your expertise to the table here. Matt, certainly, well, last but certainly not least, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and CBTS, and then one
Sure.
interesting fact about you, sir?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Matt Douglas. I'm a Senior Director of Solutions Engineering here at CBTS. CBTS is a 25-year-old, about 2,000 employee company that we're about half, we do about $1 billion a year. We're about half of a VAR and half a managed service provider. So on the managed service provider, we do everything like we're a phone company all across North America. We do thousands of retail locations where we deliver both telephony and a full security stack, a SASE and SSE stack to thousands of retail locations around the country. So we're kind of known as a hybrid of both a VAR and a managed service provider, everything from telephone service to SASE and SSE solutions to managed SOC and security offerings, just a number of things. We're kind of known for taking OEM brands and turning those into managed services and assisting our customers deploy those. Some of the big things that we've done, like we literally are Cisco's big, just won their managed service provider of the year award last year. Same thing for Palo and same thing for VeloCloud. So some of the leading technologies, we've got a lot of expertise on how to help you deliver those out there. Fun fact for me, I've been addicted to motor racing since I was a young boy. And basically I'll watch anything with 4 wheels go around a track. I've now been to 50 straight Indianapolis 500. So if it's racing, I'll go. So
Okay. So the Indy 500 here where we are, it's the Daytona 500 that a lot of people go to every year. So very interesting. I didn't know that about you, Matt.
Been there one time, the Daytona 500, and I watch a lot of NASCAR racing. So yeah, I'm addicted to it.
Well, again, thank you for joining again. And then CBTS, in addition to being, I think, Cisco's #1 managed service provider, you guys are one of their largest just VAR resale organizations.
Oh yeah, we're a gold partner and have been for quite some years. Same thing with HP, same thing with Palo. Again, we're kind of known of taking the largest OEMs and either helping people buy that technology, install it with professional services, or helping layer a managed service on top of that.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks everybody for joining. Just to tee up the conversation a little bit, we asked some of the clients that we have who said they'd be able to join today. And I don't know if they're joining for the whiskey or if they're joining for the security, but we definitely got some interesting questions that we want to kind of run through with you. I mean, obviously, you guys each come from a different perspective in the security landscape, but and you know, I feel it's important just to mention going into this that, you know, everyone is aware that security requires a layered approach, and you know, no one solution can, you know, substitute for a comprehensive security program. But I think each of your unique perspectives will be interesting. Let's kind of start with what I think is a little bit of a softball question, but Rosana, ladies first. What is one aspect that organizations overlook when devising their security strategy? And once you go ahead and start answering, if anybody else wants to join in, let's just go ahead and make this a free flow conversation.
Sure.
For those of you who are attending, if you have any questions or anything you'd like, please put them in chat, and we'll try and get those addressed as follow-ups here at the end. So again, the question, Rosana, is what is one aspect that organizations overlook when devising their security strategy?
I think it's the strategy piece, to be quite honest with you, right? So many times companies are saying to themselves, you know, I want this product or this service. How much should I be spending, right? And that's always the question that we get faced with on the security side. And a lot of the times we have to contextualize for that folks, you know, those folks, and explain to them it's not about a dollar amount, right? It's not about saying I'm going to dedicate X amount of my revenue for the year, X amount of my budget towards better protecting myself. Really, it's about smart money spent in a business context in a way that helps them reduce risk. But it all comes down to their risk tolerance that they're willing to accept internally. Some clients are very comfortable, right, running in infrastructures that are a little bit more flexible. Whereas others, maybe it's regulatory, maybe it's business leadership. Sometimes it's who, you know, if they're backed by equity, maybe it's their insurance, not insurance, or private equity firm or their insurance carrier with more stringent, obviously, requirements that they need to be adhering to. So I just say how much actually should go into that plan. So when we think about our security strategy, oftentimes we challenge folks to say, well, how does this equate to your business objectives for the year? Are you looking to open a new office, introduce a new product line, create new strategic partnerships that may introduce risk for you as a business? So a lot of the times it's getting out of that conversation in the weeds and bringing it back up to that strategy level to say, look, here are our objectives for the year. Where will we get the most ROI? But how do we move that needle towards having a security program that works today, but who we want to be at the end of the year as well?
Yeah,
I'd say that's probably, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually would say the exact same thing. Like they're missing a strategy, but I think I would spin it and maybe articulate slightly different way. I think that what I find a lot of times is a client calls and goes, I want this, whether that be I want an EDR, or I want to do an identity access management strategy, or I want, and then you go, okay, how does this play into the rest of your, you know, your security architecture and your security maturity? And then they go, well, we haven't thought about that. I just know I need EDR. And so it's the same thing that I think a lot of people have heard me say a lot around a lot of technologies is, let's not talk about the technology. Let's talk about your business, right? And build the strategy from the top down, hand picking technologies underneath and going, oh, I know I need help with identity access management, so I'm going to do that. Or, oh, I know I need this. I think it's the wrong strategy. Because like you said, when you kicked it off, John, there's no, you know, it's a comprehensive program. I always call it security is nothing but a stinky onion with lots of stinky layers that you got to kind of build on. You can't just cherry pick the middle of the onion, right? You kind of got to build the entire thing. So I would say same thing. Most companies that I've talked to, their security maturity is very low, even if they have a lot of the technologies that they already need.
I'd say one of the things that people miss is the critical element of ensuring that there's an end user security awareness training. Like really making sure that people understand how to put themselves in a position to keep their data and the company's information safe, and kind of right along with that is you know, a solid and regularly tested business continuity plan. I think, you know, if you get a breach, how far back do you have to go to get good data? You know, how just having a good plan in place that, you know, how quickly can you recover from an incident and how much information can you risk losing and going back to a point in time. So both of those are human behavior things that I think are overlooked too.
People component is always the hardest too to manage, right? And
Yep.
keep controls on. Matt, anything you want to add there?
I think it was pretty much covered there, although I will say, don't be afraid to go out and get third-party opinions. You know, as business owners, we focus a lot on keeping the doors open and keeping everything running. And it is it's difficult to make the time, but don't be afraid to go out and get these opinions. And there's a lot of opinions out there, but you know, as I said, this isn't a point solution. It's about a strategy, but you've also got to get out there. You've got to talk to a number of people, because it's a journey. It's a program. And you know, one of the things we like to pride ourselves on is that we don't want to come in and rip out every single tool you've got. We've got to understand the tools and the people and process you've got in place today, because it's a multi-year journey to get somewhere. But don't be afraid to get out and ask for opinions and get consulting, because it's just needed.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, the other thing that we're seeing is, you know, have a monitoring program. So we see a lot of customers put point solutions in place, and then, you know, they're getting a lot of noise coming off of those solutions, but they're not necessarily able to take action because of staffing levels, or just because, you know, maybe it falls to the owner in an SMB scenario. All right, so staying with the small business theme, how are you seeing small businesses keep users up to date on personal security risks that can put the business at risk, right? Because ultimately, as a small business owner myself, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night. So, I don't know, Ryan, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, the scary part is I don't think most of them are. I mean, I think the scary as that is an answer to the question. I think a lot of the SMBs I talk to, they don't really have any sort of, you know, plan in place, strategy in place for keeping their users up to date on how to stay safe in the business, whether that be from social engineering hacks, like, you know, getting caught with, you know, my rich uncle in Nigeria, you know, or any of those types of things. There's nothing informing them, hey, I'm not sending you Starbucks gift cards, you know, out of the blue to kind of help with those things. And that's one of those areas where, going back to kind of what Bill said, doing some sort of, you know, employee training, security awareness program is going to be part of any sort of governance, right? If you start to look at anything like a SOC 2, if you start to look at any of the more severe security standards, CMMC, SOC 2s, ISOs 2700s, and you look at a lot of those, they're actually going to ask, what is your security awareness program to your end employees? And they're going to be expecting to see something. So products like Know Before and things like that are going to be a great way to get it. But the short answer, in my opinion, is I don't think most SMBs are doing anything to keep their employees up to date on security risks.
Yeah, but I think I was going to say,
ahead.
well, one of the great things about the landscape today, though, compared to going back 5 or 10 years ago, there is just an incredible breadth of managed service providers that can help you solve these problems. And you know, it used to be that you had to be 1,000 or 5,000 employee person to kind of get value out of some managed services. You know, John, in your portfolio, you've got some fabulous providers that can come down and help a 5-person shop with all the things we're talking about right here. You know, and I think that's the beauty too of what you guys do, John, and that SMBs need to avail themselves of, because these tools have matured and these practices have matured where enterprise grade solutions are now available to SMBs if they'll just go out and look for it, and the prices is reasonable.
Correct.
And there's even some providers that have, you know, done packages specifically catered to those organizations as well, that size organization.
Yep.
Rosana, I mean, you guys have a pretty broad scope, and I know the SMB isn't really your target market, but any thoughts there?
Oh, certainly. I think it's back to the education piece, right? Out of sight, out of mind, is very prevalent. And when we look at security, whether you're in the SMB, you know, your higher end or your mid market, or your large enterprise, it's about making sure that everyone understands that they have an obligation, right? Of course, it's going to be different with the sets of permissions that they have and things like that, but it does start at the top, right? That's how we create strong security culture. So it's important to have these discussions with our user base to make sure that they understand what's acceptable and what isn't. And we have to create a culture where we can have a conversation when things go wrong, right? The worst thing that we can do with users is make them afraid to tell us that they might have made a mistake. So making sure that they know that it's okay, right, when things happen, because the business has thought about this, right? There's safeguards in play. Look, we can all be more impactful when we know about things when it's happening. If you have visibility in play, right? If you're doing a managed security offering where it can be understood if a user clicked or entered their password or did things like that, that's fantastic. That's a safeguard, but we don't want to rely on that, right? We want to make sure our first line of defense being our users, understand, well, we shouldn't use the same password on Facebook as we do at work, right? And each of those things are really important. But then to my point earlier, it is about that resilience, right? We want to have the governance to be able to say, hey, there's a policy here that says, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this further on in the conversation, but we can't be putting our trade secret information into, OpenAI or ChatGPT because we don't know the repositories behind that. So it's making sure that the users have an understanding of what's okay and what's not, but the business has the functionality from an IT perspective and a cybersecurity perspective. Look, let's err on the side of caution and assume that they clicked, or let's assume that they've entered their password. So we want to detect when they do that, but educate them to explain to them, look, no user will know that if they put company data in their Google Drive, their personal Google Drive, if that Google Drive has a security event, well, who's on the hook? The company, right? So getting to start that conversation, I believe, is really important in a flexible way, right? Where they're not scared.
Well, I don't know if I am impressed with us or disappointed in us, but it took us 31 minutes to the first mention of AI. So I appreciate you throwing it out there. We definitely have a lot of questions around that coming up. And so one of those we'll jump into, and let's go there now for a little bit, is let's talk about a little bit about Copilot. So one of the questions that came in from one of the participants today is our IT team is beta testing Copilot, which that's kind of the strategy that we're seeing across a lot of our customers, is they're either identifying small groups or the IT team to do some beta testing. So the question is, what advice do you have with regard to having the best rollout to the rest of a group of healthcare users? What are gotchas, HR behaviors, user training, et cetera? And I guess, Matt, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Get help. This is a brand new product,
Yeah.
right? And you're talking about your most important intellectual property, putting it into a system that makes it more accessible for your users to get to that intellectual property. And more access means more risk. And so you got, and there's work, and I'm not an expert in the Copilot side, so there's some panels here who might know some more about it, but my understanding is that where we're going on Copilot 2, it also is about planning the data that you're going to expose, the labeling of that data. This is brand new territory. And if somebody is going to, like we've deployed internally, we've used a program called Custom GTP, to take our marketing data and make it easier for folks internally to respond to RFPs and to write responses to things like that. Well, that's not really intellectual property. But if you're talking about taking your intellectual property in your business and dropping it into Copilot, making that more accessible, you better do some serious planning about that data, what you're doing, the rules around it, training. So again, I'm not an expert on it, but that's a little bit that I know, that this is brand new technology, and you need to get some help, in my opinion, if you're going to be doing serious work there.
Yeah,
So
I know, Bill, we've had a lot of sessions and a lot of discussions around that, and we're getting ready to do some testing internally ourselves. Anything you want to add there? And then Ryan, I want to come to you, because obviously you have a practice built around this and probably something to say there. So
Yeah, I think what Matt was saying is exactly right. It's a new technology, and there's, unfortunately, YouTube University doesn't have a whole lot of information out there yet. So you really need to be partnering with an expert, getting with somebody who is, who's in the trenches already, who's looking at this stuff. I mean, they're discovering every day new aspects where we need to put guardrails around certain aspects of Copilot to keep our data safe. So I think what you were saying before about John, about piloting it with a small group, but then also having a consultant right alongside you, helping you avoid the pitfalls, is probably two critical pieces to the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you guys are hitting it pretty well. It is a new technology. There's a lot still being discovered as far as the best way to put readiness assessments. If you go out there and put Copilot readiness assessments, you'll see a bunch of companies offering them, and you'll see them all having different styles. So it's not all baked into, no one's figured out, I think, the exact perfect sauce yet. But at the core of it, AI, the day you turn it on, is like a newborn baby, and it knows nothing, and it's going to learn based on the data that you put in front of it. I.e., if you take a child and have that child born in South America, there's a greater chance they're going to grow up liking soccer and football. If they're born in America, there's a higher chance they're going to like baseball and basketball. Switch those same two children, and they might have pick the other sport, right? Because it is a lot to do with exposure and where you are. So remember, the data you put in is going to give the intelligence that you're teaching Copilot, your newborn baby. So the areas that I always tell everyone is, first things, you need to make sure your data is completely prepared to be moved over. Any data that you are going to be moving, you need to make sure you know what it is, you've analyzed it, and you've started to classify it. So you can use tags and classifications and labels on that data to start to group it, to use ways to teach that AI to pay attention or to ignore different things. The second component is you're going to be centralizing a lot of your PII, PHI data, depending on what kind of organizations are on here. Quickly, PII is personal information. A personal identity information, social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, and PHI is personal health records. You know, I have a bad heart, I have a fake arm, whatever that might be, is all going to be that PHI data. If you have any of those, you know, that data that you need to keep secured, you need to know what that is. You need to identify that, and you need to lock that down using things like DLP, data loss prevention. And then the final thing you want to do is optimize that. Then you can start to optimize it. That's going to be done through building your governance program, making sure that you have a team of people who are constantly looking at the framework of that, looking at the policies that you're using, and making sure that your Copilot is still moving in the right direction. So there's tiers of approach that need to be done inside of there to really get Copilot working the right way.
I would just add to that, I think, we all need to be aware that obviously this is a disruptive technology. Many of us that are, on the line today have lived through other disruptive technologies that have come through, and we need to be realistic, right? People call all the time and they say, I'm going to block AI, and we're like, no, you're not, right? Even if you think about ChatGPT, OpenAI, right, or any of those underlying platforms, they're now embedded in other offerings, in other technologies. So it's not as simple as just saying, I will not allow access to this. Actually, a fun question for the group: does anybody, maybe other than the panelists, does anybody know who owns the large majority of OpenAI?
Anybody?
Microsoft.
Yep.
So being aware of these things, I think, is so important because it's not going away, right? We need to create our businesses on a path that will get us to a point of adoption where we're comfortable with it. And I really like, Ryan, what you'd mentioned, because I think it's important. I don't think a regular user knows, don't put our company name in AI. I don't think that they know, don't put trade secrets, don't put our intellectual property, because they're not fully, I like the comment, by the way, in the chat. They're not fully aware of the ramifications that can come kind of behind it. So I guess it does go back to that, to the business conversation of, hey, are we even telling our users what our restricted data is? Are we explaining to them what we're considering to be confidential? Are we telling them this is internal use only, right? Don't share this out of the company.
And that all comes on governance, Rosana, right? So it's a governance conversation first, right? It's an understanding
very much
your
so.
data. It's definitively a governance and business conversation well before you talk to an engineer.
Yep.
Agreed.
So we've talked a little bit about AI now and governance. We've talked a little bit about how people are one of our greatest threats. And, obviously one of the things that most businesses will try and do is, look at maybe a zero trust solution. But that comes with a lot of complexity and a lot of change to user behavior. Complexity in the workforce's daily operation can cause inefficiencies, et cetera. How do you balance the added time to accomplish tasks with, a potential deployment of zero trust in the organization and the security benefits? Let's see. Let's go with Rosana on that one.
So I think it's twofold. Obviously we have zero trust products that we can be considering deploying, but we also have principles that we should be following as well, right? So if you look at Cybersafe, right, when we meet a business, our first job to do is say, well, where do they inherit risk from? So we talk about best practices. We talk about what their footprint looks like, what their cloud presence looks like, what their network looks like. And then we have that strategic conversation where we ask them, are you following things like the principle of least privilege? Are we locking down our environment and not giving access to things that people shouldn't have access to, right? That's another way of saying that. In many cases, the answer is no. And that conversation is an afterthought, right? So if I go out and buy a zero trust product, but I don't have the foundation that can go ahead and support that, I'm still in the same position. So it's getting the business to understand, all right, we need to be thinking about these things from a visibility standpoint, from a data classification standpoint, from a network segmentation standpoint. Now, that doesn't have to be this elaborate process, right? If you were in a large enterprise and you had a larger organization, you'd handle it differently than you would within the SMB. But those considerations have to be made, because buying products and turning things into more alerts without response capability or process to addressing those, that is where companies go wrong. That's why we meet them in incident response, right? It's not that, look at the news, right? Every recent hack that we've seen, the vast majority of them have made security investments. So it's not that they didn't have an EDR. It's not that they didn't have, a zero trust product. It's that those products might have detected something, but they didn't have the response capability to go ahead and see what it was telling them until damage had already been done. So I'd say a few different pieces are worth considering when you think about things like that.
I'd agree. Anybody have something you want to add?
I would just say it's a kind of like another type of an ROI, John. So where you talk about a return on investment when you buy something, it's a return on investment to the security, right? So turning on zero trust is great. It provides network segmentation. It's going to solve things in NIST and CIS and any other type of standard that you look at. But what is the return on investment? How much do you actually get from a gained security posture by adding zero trust, right? If there isn't enough there, to your point about, well, we put it in and work became harder. Well, do you do enough data? Do you have enough issues with identity management? Do you have enough connection of data flows between different systems that segmentation is actually going to matter? Or are you relatively flat and isolated into your own kind of pods of knowledge and data and things like that anyways? And so what I always say is we have to look at this as a security ROI, not a dollars and cents, but does the increased cost of getting the job done operationally, right? Does that cost give me the value I need from a security standpoint? Because that's definitely what we should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think zero trust can easily dovetail into the SASE conversation. I don't want to necessarily go there right now, but one of the other questions that we did get, I think probably fits here is as a service model, right? Everything is going to as a service, and if you are in a regulated industry and there's rapid adoption of the as a service model, every one of your vendors is trying to move to an as a service application, and we're seeing increasing frequency in supply chain attacks. How do you best manage third-party risk tied to those supply chain and SaaS vendors, right?
I think you have to invest in cloud security solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about now that every user is a firewall, right? Every user is a threat. And I think that you have to think about every user, their user ID, the app ID they're using, the device ID that they're coming from, and that access has got to go through a central cloud clearinghouse. And that's going to control access to SaaS applications. It's going to control access back into your data center applications. And I think the tools are starting to mature enough now where it's becoming manageable and it's becoming useful. It was difficult to do that 5 years ago, but I think now you have to, if you're going to be deploying a ubiquitous security fabric, you're going to have to bite the bullet and look at cloud security solutions. And they've matured a lot. There's still probably a couple of them that really rise to the top, and then some pretenders. But I think you got to look at cloud security as pretty much being the cornerstone of where we're all headed in the future.
Well, again, go ahead, Bill. Nope.
I was just going to say, the other thing I'd add to that is, as we're taking on more adoption of as a service, is I think it's really important to know who owns the risk. There's usually a shared risk, provider owns some risk, customer owns some risk, but I think we need to look at our SaaS contracts or our as a service contracts, ask where their responsibilities end and where yours pick up. And I think it needs to be in writing with guarantees where possible. I mean, when I was doing government work, this was drilled into our heads, and it had to be everything that we did. We had to, all right, this particular risk is mitigated by XYZ from the SaaS provider. This risk is avoided because we're doing this thing. So you have to know where your risk lies, and you have to have, if somebody else is taking on some of the risk that your business would otherwise be responsible for, you need to have in writing what those risks are that you're, as a service provider, is getting or giving you in part of their contract.
I don't completely disagree with you, Bill, but then again, thinking about, I have to buy from Microsoft and Office 365. I've got to buy from Salesforce or similar things. I can't control much of their terms and conditions, but I can put some cloud security, CASB solutions in, SaaS security solutions, DLP hangers that hang off of Office 365, et cetera. They're connected via API. I think it's, I think for the near future, we're going to have to talk about, we're not going to be able to make Salesforce or Microsoft change what they do, but we're going to have to add in things to protect.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a three-pronged approach. I know I've said this now a gazillion times. First is the governance level. That's what Bill was speaking to, right? There's actually a process. If you look at any sort of governance tool, there's an entire component called third-party vendor risk management, right? Mm-hmm. And there's an entire component and process that says, this is how you should handle any sort of third-party risk, whether it be someone like Microsoft, who's not going to change you're not calling them up and saying, excuse me, I'd like to change my T's and C's, all the way down to if I'm coming in and doing work for you guys and what you guys should be doing as my team is taking a login, right, to come in and work in, again, with my team doing work with some of the people on this call. Even when my team comes in, what is that third-party risk management? Have you calculated that? And is that an understood risk in the business so that you're making decisions that are best for your business? And then there's tier two, which is I think what Matt Douglas has hit on, which is going to be using these CASB products. Using John's word earlier, he used the word zero trust. More generically, that's called network segmentation. CASB creates a segmentation between cloud providers and you, right? That allows you to set up rules and standards between them, right? So it is a cloud access secure broker. CASB is actually a tool that creates that segmentation between. I'm sure the ROI for most companies on here, that CASB investment probably got a better ROI than a zero trust does for them right now. And then the third component is most major applications, going back to what Matt's statement around Microsoft and Salesforce, release best practices on how you should build out the security of those.
Yep.
Where you can actually pull that up and go, Microsoft says if you do these things, you will be more secure. Things like the amount of clients that I go in and see that they're Microsoft, they've not even turned on DLP. They're not even running, they're not running backups, right? They're not doing any sort of access control. They're probably not going through CASB, right? So you can go through and go, okay, these are the best practices that people should be using. So it's a three-tiered approach of, do I have that third-party vendor configured accurately? Yes or no, right? Do I have a tool creating segmentation in case something goes awry and bump in the night? And do I have the governance to make sure I'm not signing agreements with bad organizations? And again, it's the layers to the stinky onion, right? And we're continuing to build more layers to the stinky onion that makes up our security architecture.
I'm sorry, Rosanna, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I do want to go back to Bill's point, though, because I think it was really important, right? If we think about the government lens, right, when you were going through those evaluations where you needed to say, hey, let's use Microsoft as an example, right? I'm not going to sever my ties with Microsoft because they're not going to listen to my question, right? That's realistic. We all understand that. But I do think it's important to have that consideration. What happens to me if something happens with Microsoft? Now, let's bring this a little bit more closer to home for businesses. We're not talking about the 10,000-pound gorillas. We're talking about your healthcare providers, your technology. If anybody on this call does anything in dental, every dental platform is 1 million years old. If anybody's in manufacturing, all of your operational technology was built for functionality, not security, but it's connected to the internet. So that's the piece that I think that we need to be considering here. Are we going to those vendors and asking them for their internal practices? Right. Again, even if they don't change, you as a business can document that. So when your insurance provider comes and said, what did you do about third-party risk? If there ever was something that happened, you can say, well, we asked them about it, right? We talked with them about it. We had that conversation. So one, let's not put our heads in the sand because we don't think that it's going to change. Let's recognize where it isn't, but have a safeguard for that. I bet you everybody here remembers a handful of years ago, a very prevalent remote access platform or an RMM essentially had a security event occur. At first, it looked like it was all of the company, and then ended up being just one specialized product. I will tell you, as a stock, we had tons of clients. Yeah, yes, I wasn't going to call them out, but yes, we had tons of clients that had that in the environment. Did everybody run to rip and replace it? No. We had to say, how do we know if something bad is happening with this deployment? Can we recognize a behavior that tells us that there's compromise or there's concern? And how do we respond to that before damage can be done, right? So I'd say visibility, along with getting the conversation going. We're never going to be perfect. No one here can give you a silver bullet. You can't buy a product or a tool that puts you in that perfect place, but we certainly can start the conversation to better protect our businesses.
And you know, to everybody's point, there's no one size fits all solution. It's you have to know what tools, what technologies, things like that you're putting into play, knowing what the risks are with those technology pieces, and then building solutions that protect you from those particular issues.
Correct.
Well, and it's important to understand those outcomes and where you sit today as well, right? And
Yep.
and I think there's, the IT departments and the folks that are on these calls with us, you also have to push back with your finance team and make them understand that sometimes a investment in security is really, an investment, a long-term investment that has to be made.
Correct.
We're coming up on time here, and we're starting to stand between people and their whiskey, and it's never a position I want to be in. So let's do a couple of, well, we talked a little bit about this, so I guess rapidly, I'll give it to just two people if we can respond. One of the participants asked a question about, they're moving a homegrown system, hosting it in the cloud, including e-commerce and CRM. What are key areas of consideration when securing cloud systems? Rosana, you want to take that one?
Sure. The first piece is understanding what it is that we're looking at, right? I have been fortunate enough to have many of these conversations where sometimes we have to have the hard talk, where it's, oh, I'm moving it to the cloud, or I'm moving it from here to there. It's going to be more secure. That's not always the case, right? Really, in every element, we took our risk from right here and we moved it over there, right?
Yep.
So we have to consider, maybe we have increased functionality or capability, but did we inherit new risk from making this change? So the first piece of it is, what are we doing, right? What are we moving? What is our information? How are we protecting it? And how do we know if that information is ever threatened, right? The fundamentals of cybersecurity: confidentiality, available, and integrity. And I said it backwards, I know. Those three things have to be considered with every move that we do. And then you can wrap a solution around it to bring you visibility the same way you would if it was in your four walls. You want to do that as you're moving it to Matt's point earlier, right? When you are adopting those cloud platforms, how are we securing them? Are we bringing, capability like a SIEM? Are we bringing capability like a managed security service to that as well?
Yeah, Bill, I mean, is there a blueprint or a white paper to follow that can be used to make it secure by design?
I think one of the starting points is like Rosana was saying, you really just need to decide what you want to accomplish. And then the next thing that or part of that discussion is, are you subjected to any regulatory requirements? SOX, HIPAA, cyber insurance, PCI DSS. Then maybe even looking at what your peers and competitors are doing. Look at companies similarly sized and larger in your industry. What are they doing? I would say generally speaking, there's some really good frameworks to look at. It really depends on how deep you want to get into it. CIS is tried and true, and it's kind of I would say a bare minimum framework that people would want to look at. You can get crazy and get into NIST and high trust and ISO 27001, CMMC. You can go crazy, but I think CIS is a easy enough one to follow along with in most cases. And you would just have to decide which one fits your industry best.
That's a good point. Let's jump into AI, because we're, again, getting short on time. I think we could, extend this out for another hour easily. So I appreciate everybody paying patient with us. But at the risk of being too general, because we received a lot of AI questions. I mean, what do you see as the impact of AI in security right now? We'll start with you, Ryan, and let's do maybe a 2-minute version.
Yeah. At the core of it, we're seeing both really cool positive things and really cool negative things. So on the negative side, they've gotten to the point where it's so advanced, if you haven't heard of any of these yet, They'll actually call you on the phone now and tell your mother, hey, I'm your mom. I'm broke down the side of the road. My cell phone battery's dead. I need you to transfer me $5,000. The tow truck driver was nice enough to let me borrow his cell phone. It'll sound like your mom. So using deep fake audio that they found on her Facebook page, using those social hacks again, they're then taking that and putting it into a phone, placing phone calls. That's scary levels of like things that you have to pay attention to. And that's all being driven by AI. We're also seeing that the threats coming in, phishing campaigns, instead of it generically going, here's your Starbucks gift card, click on this link. What we're now seeing is because I don't like Starbucks, so it's not going to ask me that anymore. It's going to see that last night I said, I really loved a good beer. So it's going to say, hey, Budweiser's offering you a $20 gift card to go get beer. They're going to focus now on what they're seeing in your social pages, what they're catching in your email, and what they're learning about you through any sort of social engineering. That's really scary, trying to keep up with that. So I would say that's an impact on the negative. On the positive side, what I will say is instead of humans trying to build SOARs, you heard Rosana talk about a SOAR earlier, which is orchestration and automation. Those are the two important components there. You can imagine doing orchestration and automation with an AI is far easier, far faster, and far quicker at helping to limit that down so that you can keep your really talented human resources, which Rosana has a ton of on her desk. I've met a few of them. And those guys, instead of being bogged down doing things that AI can take care of for them, they get to get into those things that are above AI's ability to analyze, right? Once there's emotion and there's just factual components. So I think that AI taking the pressure off of the human security analysts and allowing that to move up is probably the most, two impacts on the negative and positive.
I think
what
that's
I
a
think
good
is the
point.
most scary?
Roseanne, I'm gonna tee it up for you a little bit, give you a little specifics around it because we're running short on time.
Deal.
So how are you seeing security vendors using AI to strengthen the security posture for mid-sized businesses? Right.
Great question. But to Ryan's point, what I think the most scary thing about AI is? It's that people believe everything it tells them.
Yeah.
Nobody validates, which is the craziest thing. It's like, it's not always right. AI is based on the information on the internet, which is historically wrong, right? So that to me is scary. But AI for security, automating the things, to Ryan's point, that can be automated is important. But again, back to what I just said, we have to trust but verify, right? So security companies like us and many others use AI to take the things that we know are malicious and identify those quicker. Where it's always going to need that human element is verification and validation, right? In security, it's never if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. It's usually everything else first, right? Before we establish. So a lot of our underlying platforms, a lot of the EDRs that you guys see in the news and online, they've got great elements of AI built into it. But let's remember, again, we need to supplement those things. The last thing we ever want to do is inherently trust a single product, platform, or tool. Let's use it to the best of breed and its capability, because AI is not replacing our jobs, right? Companies that are leveraging AI, that's the conversation that we're going to be having, right? So let's cut costs where they can be cut appropriately and efficiently, but let's never fully replace that human element that lets us do that verification.
And scale more effectively too, right? I think that's the other key there. How are you seeing businesses as they adopt and deploy new AI strategies themselves, like Copilot and others, right? How can they ensure that their own AI systems don't inadvertently contribute to the security threat landscape? Matt, you want to chime in on that one?
Oh, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's about employee training. I mean, greater access to data, greater access to tools means now as an employee, I might get to important information easier. I might be posting that in places that shouldn't be posted, my own personal Google, Gmail or whatever. So I think it's
just governance.
It comes back to culture. We've got to train our people the power of these new tools, but also the risk of these new tools, and make sure they understand it.
And are there any ways, Ryan, that you're seeing organizations use AI to, help overcome maybe staffing shortages or limited IT resources, specifically within the IT department?
Yeah, we're actually seeing years ago, I think, John, you and I, many, many years ago, even before I started this company, sat and talked one time about the emergence of what we started calling IT ops, right? And starting to see a lot of IT ops come out. So there are a lot of tools and a lot of functionality that used to be very manual processes that are now fairly automated. Again, even taking that and looking at the SOAR that like a Cybersafe would have, being able to make decisions based off of off of incoming information. And so where I'm seeing AI expanding limited IT resources is helping them get that information to their fingertips quicker, and even taking what used to be very mundane tasks that those people used to have to do and moving it into, you know, some sort of, you know, AI automated task, or what I might say actually leans closer to machine learning than true AI. But I think those overlap so closely right now in today's world that we can call them the same for the sake of conversation.
Yeah, understood. And we didn't touch quantum computing. I'm sorry if you know, if you had a question around that. I tried to get as many questions in here as we could. I guess to sort of wrap things up, and you know, at the risk of changing the conversation to looking ahead further than we have today, right? I guess looking ahead, what do you see as the most significant emerging threat in cybersecurity? And don't tell me AI, but what do you see as that most significant emerging threat in cybersecurity? And we'll start with you, Bill.
I'll go back to what I said before. I think the emerging threat is ignorance. People not knowing that they're giving away the keys to the kingdom. You know, with things like AI faking out, you know, voice fake and that kind of, it's crazy to me. And just being able to discern that stuff, on top of being able to discern something as simple as, you know, an email address, you know, that looks legit, has some, you know, other world character in there that looks like it, maybe it's not really an O, it's some other character that, you know, but the email looks legit, you know, from your bank or something. So I think that, you know, that's what I'm going to say is ignorance.
I'll go along with that.
People
I think it's really the social engineering aspect. Like we as a company, I mentioned we do a lot of telephony work, and so we have lots of call centers we support with dial tone and products and call center applications, et cetera. You went back 5 years ago, nobody talked about security and social engineering in a call center environment, and now it is absolutely priority number one, because that's one of the great places to get the information, right? And it started to happen. I literally had a phone call yesterday come in and said, is this you? You know, are you there? Well, the answer is yes. Well, I didn't answer yes because it's just part of gathering data. I mean, I would bet that was some kind of a fake call, because I know it was. So I think social engineering, deep fakes, AI, I mean, I'm going to say AI there. I think it's a big thing. The training users, anybody who's facing the public and talking to public and gets requests for information, I think that's one of the big areas we've got to focus on.
It's social engineering. I'm going to say the same thing. It's always going to be social engineering. And the way you're never going to know what the threat is tomorrow. You kind of joked at quantum. We talked about AI. But none of us on this panel can tell you what threat is going to pop up tomorrow. All of us combined couldn't sit in a room the rest of our lives and tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. And so what it comes down to again is having the security maturity architecture, right, that covers the bases and provides that layer to the onion. So if a new social threat comes out, maybe I don't even have time to get it into know before. Maybe John doesn't even have time to wake up and send the email to his employees tomorrow morning before it's already in someone's mailbox, right, from a social engineering. So it has to come down to the only way to take care of security tomorrow is to have a maturity that goes, what are we going to do when someone falls for a social engineering hack? Regardless of what that exact hack is, shouldn't matter. How do we have the stinky layers to the onion to take care of that threat? But hands down, it will always be social engineering.
Yep.
Yeah, and how quickly can we find out, right, when something happens? A example that I gave to the group when we were preparing for this is a client of ours actually went onto Google to look for told you the wrong thing, guys, by the way, it was Adobe. They wanted to download Adobe, an executable. They went onto Google and they clicked the first link. Well, that was a malicious link that someone paid to have promoted or something along those lines. And when the user downloaded it, they downloaded a piece of malware with them, right? So they just went out to the open internet and trusted something. If that wasn't seen in real time, if that wasn't contained, then the threat actor obviously would have been able to accomplish their goal of likely impacting that organization. So just controlling the damage, right? How quickly can we see these things when they happen? They're always going to keep happening, right? Obviously, we want to talk to prevention, but let's use our information that we have available to us to detect all of the things that we don't know about, right? Our behaviors that look weird, prevent everything that we know to, and then let's not forget, we want to transfer remaining risk over to the appropriate cyber insurance policy. That's the trifecta that we have to be thinking.
And I think I'd add on there and say, how quickly can we recover from that breach?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
disaster recovery and backup didn't used to be thought of as a cybersecurity component, and it is now.
It absolutely
100% it
is.
is. Yeah, I mean, we're in a situation where it's not if, but when, right? So you have to be prepared. That requires planning. It requires having the right tools in place, having the right resources, having organizations who can parachute in if and when an issue happens. And I agree with you guys. I think the human element is always going to be the biggest challenge. So thank you, everyone. I know we ran over a couple of minutes, and in a minute here, we'll turn it over to Cindy, but I just wanted to thank each of you individually. Thank you for taking the time today. This was a really fun conversation. An hour flew by for me. Hopefully it did for everybody else on here as well. And my hope is that each of you got something out of this that you were looking for. Please keep in mind that, you know, TruPoint is here. All of these resources can be brought in to have a conversation at no obligation, no risk for your organization at any time if you heard something that, you know, warrants a further discussion.